Are you waking up tired even after a full night's sleep, noticing that your energy isn't what it used to be, or feeling quietly frustrated that your firmness just doesn't hold the way it once did? If you're over 60, you're not alone, and I hear this concern every single day in my clinic. I'm a board-certified urologist, and for decades I've helped men navigate these changes with discretion and respect. Today, I want to share one overlooked body position, backed by research that can make a real difference, something most men are never told. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and consider subscribing so we can keep this important conversation going together. But here's what most people don't realize, and I see this misunderstanding cause unnecessary worry every day. When firmness changes after 60, most men immediately blame testosterone or assume it's just old age catching up. They quietly tell themselves this is the price of getting older, and that belief alone can feel heavy, even discouraging. But the truth is, in the vast majority of men I treat, testosterone is only a small piece of a much larger picture. What's really happening has far more to do with circulation, nerve signaling, muscle coordination, and how well your body recovers at night. As we age, our blood vessels naturally become a little stiffer. That's not a personal failure, it's biology. Healthy erections depend on flexible arteries that can widen quickly and deliver a strong surge of blood. Over time, those vessels lose some elasticity, especially if you've had years of stress, poor sleep, or metabolic issues. The result isn't that desire disappears, it's that the plumbing doesn't respond as efficiently. Many men still feel aroused, still want intimacy, but the firmness just doesn't match what their mind expects. That disconnect can be deeply frustrating. Another key factor most men have never heard explained clearly is nitric oxide. This is a molecule your body uses to relax blood vessels and allow blood to flow in. With age, nitric oxide production naturally declines. That doesn't mean it's gone. It means it needs better conditions to work. If circulation is impaired or muscles are tense, that signal never fully reaches its destination. This is one reason pills sometimes help and sometimes don't. They amplify a signal that still needs the right mechanical environment to work properly. Then there's the pelvic floor, which is often misunderstood. Many men assume these muscles are weak, but in my practice, I far more often see the opposite. The pelvic floor becomes chronically tight. Tight muscles don't allow blood to stay where it needs to stay. Imagine stepping on a garden hose. You don't get better flow, you get restriction. When the pelvic muscles don't relax at the right time, blood escapes too quickly and firmness fades. This isn't about strength, it's about coordination and relaxation. Sleep plays a much bigger role than most men expect. Deep restorative sleep is when your body resets hormones, repairs blood vessels, and reinforces nerve signaling. Poor sleep raises stress hormones like cortisol, which directly interfere with erection quality. I've had patients in their 60s who assumed their issues were permanent, only to see improvement once their sleep improved. Fatigue alone can blunt the body's natural response, even when desire is present. This is why medications don't always solve the problem. Pills don't change gravity. They don't adjust muscle tension. They don't correct how blood is physically moving through your body in real time. I've sat with men who felt embarrassed that medication stopped working, and I always tell them the same thing. You're not broken, and you didn't fail treatment. The treatment simply didn't address the real issue. I remember a patient in his late 60s who told me quietly that he felt like his body had betrayed him. He was healthy, active, still deeply connected to his partner, yet his confidence had slipped away. When we talked through the mechanics, instead of blaming age or masculinity, you could see the relief on his face. Understanding replaced shame, and once shame fades, progress becomes possible. So if this is something you've been carrying silently, I want you to hear this clearly. Changes in firmness are not a reflection of your worth, your strength, or your masculinity. They are mechanical and physiological changes that respond to the right conditions. And this brings me to something most men never hear, even from their doctors. And it has everything to do with how your body is positioned when blood flow matters most. Now here's the mistake almost every man over 60 is making, and it's rarely talked about in a medical office. We tend to think of firmness as something that either happens or doesn't, as if it's a switch we've lost control over. But the body doesn't work that way. Firmness is the result of blood moving efficiently into the tissue and staying there long enough to do its job. And whether that happens or not is deeply influenced by something very simple: gravity, alignment, and position. Gravity matters more than most men realize, especially as we get older. Blood doesn't just magically rush where we want it to go. It follows pressure gradients and physical pathways. When arteries are young and flexible, they can overcome less than ideal conditions. But as vessels stiffen with age, they become more sensitive to positioning. If blood has to work against gravity or compression, inflow slows down. I often explain this to patients by saying the heart can pump strongly, but it can't bend the laws of physics. One concept that's important to understand here is venous leak, and I want to explain it simply. An erection isn't just about blood getting in, it's about blood staying in. Veins are supposed to partially close off during firmness, trapping blood inside. Certain positions increase pressure in the abdomen and pelvis, which forces those veins open too early. When that happens, blood escapes before firmness can be maintained. Many men blame themselves or assume this means something is wrong, when in reality the body is just responding to physical forces. Pelvic tilt plays a major role in this process. When the pelvis is angled in a way that increases intra-abdominal pressure, it compresses blood vessels and nerves. This compression interferes with both inflow and retention. I see this in my exam room weekly. Men come in saying they can achieve firmness briefly, but it fades quickly. When we look beyond labs and talk about mechanics, the pattern becomes clear. Their bodies are fighting against their own positioning. Certain common positions also compress critical blood vessels. When the hips are flexed in a way that shortens muscles and tightens the pelvic floor, it creates resistance. Blood prefers the path of least resistance. If that path is narrowed or squeezed, the result is predictable. Younger men often get away with it because their tissues are more forgiving. Their vessels are more elastic, their recovery faster, and their nervous system more resilient. After 60, those margins shrink. The body becomes more honest about what it needs. This is where frustration often builds. Men tell me, "Doctor, it works sometimes, but not always." An inconsistency is often a mechanical issue, not a hormonal one. It depends on how the body is aligned in that moment. Small changes in angle can mean the difference between steady blood flow and premature loss of firmness. This isn't about effort or performance, it's about physics and physiology working together. What's striking is how rarely this is discussed openly. Most men are never told that position affects blood flow just as much as medication or hormones. They're left thinking the problem is internal or permanent. But once men understand this, something shifts. The problem feels solvable. It becomes something you can work with, not something that defines you. And once researchers began adjusting for age and overall health, something fascinating emerged. One specific position consistently preserved firmness longer than others, even in older men. And I'll tell you, it surprised even seasoned urologists like myself. But here's what most people don't expect when they hear the word position. This has nothing to do with performance tricks, flexibility, or doing anything uncomfortable or unnatural. In fact, the reason this position works has very little to do with effort at all. It works because it respects how the male body is built, how blood prefers to flow, and how the nervous system responds when it feels safe instead of rushed. Clinically speaking, the position I'm referring to places the body in a more neutral alignment. The spine is supported rather than arched or compressed. The pelvis is not tilted forward aggressively, and the hips are not locked into tension. From a medical standpoint, this matters because it reduces unnecessary pressure on the major blood vessels supplying the pelvis. When those vessels are free from compression, arterial inflow improves naturally. Blood doesn't have to fight gravity or tight muscles to get where it needs to go. One of the most important benefits of this position is how it affects venous leakage. As we discussed earlier, firmness depends on blood staying in place. This position minimizes downward pressure on the pelvic veins, allowing them to close more effectively. When veins are not being forced open by gravity or abdominal pressure, blood remains trapped longer. In physiology-based studies, this reduced venous outflow is one of the clearest explanations for improved firmness, even in men with lower testosterone levels. Another critical element is what happens to the pelvic floor. Many men unknowingly clench these muscles, especially when they're anxious or trying to make things work. Clenching actually works against firmness. In this position, the pelvic floor is encouraged to relax rather than brace. Relaxed muscles allow better circulation and reduce the squeezing effect that pushes blood out too soon. I often tell patients that relaxation, not force, is what supports consistency. There's also a powerful nervous system component here. As men age, the sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for stress and alertness, tends to stay overactive. This fight or flight state directly interferes with sexual response. The position we're discussing naturally shifts the body toward parasympathetic activation, the rest and restore mode. Breathing becomes slower, muscle tension drops, blood flow improves. This isn't psychological trickery, it's a physiological response the body recognizes immediately. What's especially interesting is how anxiety changes in this posture. Many men describe feeling less pressure, less urgency, and less self-monitoring. That matters more than most people realize. Anxiety constricts blood vessels. Calm widens them. In clinical observations, men consistently report not only better firmness, but a greater sense of ease. When the mind stops racing, the body follows. I've had patients tell me they were shocked by how simple the change felt. No strain, no performance mindset, just alignment and comfort. And this is why testosterone levels don't tell the whole story. Even with lower hormone levels, the body can respond well when mechanical and neurological conditions are right. Hormones amplify signals, but they don't replace proper blood flow or relaxation. Physiology-based studies support this idea repeatedly. When researchers control for age, cardiovascular health, and hormone levels, body position still plays a measurable role in erection quality and duration. That's not speculation, that's observation. And yet, it's rarely discussed in routine care. Most men never hear about it unless they ask very specific questions. But there's an important truth I want to be clear about before we move on. Position can open the door, but it doesn't guarantee consistency by itself. There's one supporting factor that determines whether this works reliably or only once in a while, and that's what we need to talk about next. But here's what most men don't realize once they discover a position that helps. Position opens the door, but habits determine whether that door stays open. In my experience, the men who see lasting improvement aren't doing anything extreme or complicated. They're simply supporting their bodies in ways that allow the physiology to work night after night instead of fighting against it. The first habit is sleep, and I cannot overstate its importance. Deep sleep is when your body produces the majority of its restorative hormones and reinforces healthy nerve signaling. It's also when nocturnal erections occur, which are not just incidental, they're essential maintenance for penile tissue. Poor sleep means fewer nocturnal erections, reduced oxygen delivery, and weaker responsiveness over time. Many men focus on what happens in the moment, but the groundwork is laid hours earlier while you're asleep. Improving sleep quality alone has led some of my patients to notice stronger, more reliable firmness without changing anything else. Breathing is another overlooked factor. Shallow, chest-based breathing keeps the nervous system in a state of low-level stress. That stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, which directly interferes with blood flow. Slow diaphragmatic breathing does the opposite. It signals safety, it allows blood vessels to widen. When breathing is calm and rhythmic, the parasympathetic system takes over and the body becomes far more cooperative. This isn't about meditation or technique, it's about letting the body exit performance mode and enter function mode. Pelvic floor coordination is equally important. I want to be very clear here. This is not about constant tightening or doing aggressive exercises. Over-tightening is one of the most common mistakes I see. The pelvic floor needs to contract and relax at the right times. When it stays clenched, it restricts blood flow and increases venous leakage. Gentle awareness and relaxation often matter more than strength. Men who learn to release tension instead of forcing control often notice improvement faster than they expect. Hydration and evening routines also play a quiet but meaningful role. Dehydration thickens blood slightly and reduces circulation efficiency. Late-night alcohol, heavy meals, or screens can disrupt sleep architecture and hormone balance. Simple changes, drinking enough water, eating earlier, dimming lights, winding down, send powerful signals to the body that it's time to restore. These aren't lifestyle cliches, they're physiological cues. Now, I also want to be responsible and clear. If firmness issues appear suddenly, worsen rapidly, or are accompanied by pain or other symptoms, that's a reason to seek medical evaluation. Erectile changes can sometimes be an early signal of cardiovascular disease or metabolic issues. Addressing mechanics doesn't replace proper medical care, it complements it. In my practice, the best outcomes happen when men combine understanding with evaluation, not avoidance. What I want you to take away from this is that consistency comes from alignment. Alignment between position, habits, and the nervous system. None of these require medication to begin. They require awareness, patience, and respect for how your body actually works. I've watched men regain confidence simply by removing the obstacles that were in their way all along. And this brings us back to something I want every man watching to hear, especially if you've felt discouraged. But here's what I want you to hear most clearly, especially if you've been quietly worried that you've passed some invisible point of no return. It's not too late. I say that not as encouragement alone, but as a physician who has watched men in their late 60s and 70s reconnect with their bodies in ways they thought were gone forever. The male body does not simply shut down with age, it adapts. And when you give it the right signals, it responds, often more quickly than you expect. One of the most damaging myths men carry is the idea that decline is inevitable and irreversible, that once firmness changes, confidence has to follow it down. But what I see in my practice tells a very different story. I see men who thought they were broken discover that nothing was wrong with them at all. Their bodies were simply asking for different conditions, less tension, better rest, more understanding. When those needs are met, the response can be remarkable. There is strength in wanting to understand your health. There is dignity in asking questions instead of suffering in silence. For too long, men have been taught to ignore their bodies or push through problems alone. But seeking clarity is not weakness. It's responsibility. It's leadership in your own life. And it's one of the most masculine things you can do. You deserve vitality. You deserve closeness and connection without anxiety hovering in the background. You deserve confidence that comes from knowing how your body works, not from forcing it to perform. Aging does not take those things away. Confusion does. Misinformation does. Silence does. I've had men sit across from me and say, "I wish someone had explained this years ago." And my answer is always the same. The second best time to learn is now. Your body is still listening. It's still capable. And when you start working with it instead of against it, hope stops being abstract. It becomes something you can feel again. And that's why this conversation doesn't end here. If you found this valuable, I want to invite you to join this community and subscribe so you never miss guidance designed specifically for men like you. Men who want clarity, not hype, and solutions that respect both science and dignity. What we talked about today wasn't a trick or a shortcut. It was an understanding of how your body responds when alignment, circulation, and calm work together. That overlooked position, combined with the right habits, restores something many men think they've lost control over. You deserve confidence, steady energy, and deep restorative sleep. You deserve to feel strong and at home in your body again. Take ownership of your health with respect and patience. I'll be here to guide you every step forward.